If there's any doubt in the investments that you have, squash those doubts. So anything related to enterprise firewalls or any other network security tools that are out there, they still matter. They still have an importance and they still have a place within your zero trust journey. What needs to happen is that you need to go back and assess, are you actually leveraging these tools in the most effective and efficient manner? And how do you need to adapt to achieve those outcomes for zero trust and reach those maturity levels that are necessary for you to mature as an organization?
Welcome to Threat Vector, the Palo Alto Networks podcast where we discuss pressing cybersecurity threats and resilience and uncover insights into the latest industry trends. I'm your host, David Moulton, Director of Thought Leadership for Unit 42. Today, we're going to take a closer look at one of the most critical shifts in security strategy, platformization. The security landscape has never been more complex. Hybrid environments, evolving threats, and the rapid adoption of AI are forcing organizations to rethink how they protect their data, networks, and users. This is where security platformization comes in, unifying security tools into a more seamless AI-powered approach to cyber resilience. To help us unpack what this means, I'm joined by Carlos Rivera, Senior Analyst at Forrester, who specializes in zero trust, enterprise firewalls, and the future of network security. Carlos brings a wealth of experience from his time in the U.S. Air Force, cybersecurity leadership roles, and now as a thought leader shaping how businesses approach zero trust strategies. We'll explore how enterprise firewalls are evolving beyond perimeter defense, the role of AI in security operations, and how organizations can balance platformization with best-in-class solutions. If you're wondering how to make smarter security investments while keeping pace with modern threats, this episode is for you. Carlos Rivera, welcome to Threat Vector. Really excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Carlos, I looked at your LinkedIn background before we started our podcast today, and you've had this really fascinating career spanning the U.S. Air Force, a couple of leadership roles in cybersecurity. Now you're with Forrester as a senior analyst. I'm curious, what drew you to cybersecurity all those years ago? And if you can give me your perspective on how things have evolved over the years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think you might be surprised that cybersecurity wasn't initially at top of mind when I was in the Air Force. It was my career, but honestly, when I was going to school and trying to complete my bachelor's degree, it was for aeronautical engineering, believe it or not. But it was my wife, my then girlfriend, my now wife. They kind of rallied me in. She said, "Hey, you already work in a very promising career field. You're already receiving the technical training that most people would dream of. Why not continue to pursue that field of professional study and things like that?" And I said, "You know what? That's a good point." And I decided to kind of just shift gears and transition into more studying for cybersecurity, specifically more around network security, network engineering. And that was kind of where the background was. Because my career in the Air Force, the position itself was considered a cyber transport technician, which was the jack of all trades, kind of master of none situation. And we call ourselves that because we had to learn almost every role in the IT field. That included network guys, network admin, network engineering, network architect, transport. So we had to figure out satellite communications, bringing that in, encrypting it, decrypting it, splitting the signal from data and voice, and distributing it out to the base of operations, supporting warfighters, but also sysadmins, right? Typical stuff around that. So we kind of touched a little bit of everything, but we were never really a master of anything. That makes sense. So that was where the career kind of started, and I really want to continue to pursue more a focus on network engineering and network security. So I did that for about 10 years. I was able to finish my bachelor's degree. I got my associate's degree through the Community College of the Air Force in computer information. Got on the Air Force, did that as a contractor for about 5 years. So that was where I really got my exposure in zero trust, right? With the company I was with at the time, really started getting more interest in wanting to do more understanding research behind zero trust architecture. What does it mean for the industry? What does it mean for the company? And how do we take what that information security model promotes, apply it internally for one, but then two, take what we've learned from applying that internally and take it back to our clients that we support in the federal space to help them with that journey. So I did that for about 3 years before joining Forrester. And now I'm here at Forrester, continuing that responsibility, if you will, of getting an understanding of what organizations are struggling with when it comes to adopting zero trust, how to interpret the core principles and concepts that zero trust promotes, and to achieve those outcomes. And what are the tools and technologies out there that they can help them achieve those outcomes.
So I guess my big takeaway here is keep listening to your wife. She has great advice.
I do.
Yeah. You and me both, man. My wife is the yin to my yang and fills in a lot of those gaps and biases that I've got. So, well, that's fascinating to think that you went into the Air Force with an aeronautical engineer view of things, saw an opportunity, had an opportunity pointed out to you, and then went and learned as much as you could. What a great idea to take advantage of the opportunity in front of you. Carlos, you're the lead author on the Forrester Wave Enterprise Firewall Solutions that's out. And in it, you emphasize that enterprise firewalls have evolved beyond traditional perimeter security. Can you talk to me about how modern firewalls contribute to that zero trust strategy that you were alluding to earlier? And what are some of the key innovations that have driven this shift?
I mean, that's a great question. I think part of what I do as an analyst here at Forrester, I find that it's a responsibility for me, is to kind of try to look past those misconceptions and try to bring some more ground understanding around those technologies and tools, such as enterprise firewalls, that an organization might find or believe that they are no longer viable or valuable controls that can be implemented, right? But the truth is, they still matter, but it's really an organization's responsibility to ultimately determine where these tools should be applying. What's the use case? What's the scope? Where does this tool fit ideally in our architecture for a long-term zero trust architectural goal? And so what does it mean? It may mean that you're reducing the number of the instances of firewall, but really it's to bring more focus on more strategic applications of those firewalls around more critical network and infrastructure assets, where software solutions that are cloud-based might be limited, right? And these are environments that are faced with highly restrictive networks, meaning they are completely cut off from the internet. They have to be something that's self-contained, or those environments that have something that needs flexibility, right? They need something that's going to be deployed in their environment that's flexible enough to meet the adaptable changes of the business needs and requirements. So if it's something that can be deployed on-prem as a hardware software solution, but then later on, if the plan is to migrate to the cloud and they can transition to that and make that transition more seamless, then that's something an organization will look at. And these enterprise firewall solutions are doing just that. They're adding that capability to kind of have that flexibility. But there's also environments that might need this solution to help them address initiatives that are on an environment that might be more limited in terms of securing architecture that have legacy components. And some of these modern tools just don't have that legacy support. Most enterprise firewalls can still support that microsegmentation strategy at the workload level for those kind of environments, right? So for an organization that still wants to achieve that level of maturity, right, like I mentioned, microsegmentation, but they are constrained with maybe a resource in terms of skill set, budgeting, time available to them, then being able to leverage the likes of an enterprise firewall that might already exist in their environment, that's something that's a benefit for that organization. So because these are tools that already benefit from the next generation capability of a firewall, right? They already have next generation capabilities, but they go beyond that by introducing new modern capability that can enable ZTNA. If your organization is looking to enable that, and application aware with AI, right? You're starting to leverage AI components within the enterprise firewall to can help to monitor, control traffic at the workload level.
Yeah. Carlos, it's been quite a while since I've thought about microsegmentation. I mean, we're talking probably 5-6 years ago since I talked to somebody like yourself that's an expert. I'm wondering what you would advise. How should organizations rethink microsegmentation within the Zero Trust model to maximize that security effectiveness that they're looking for?
Yeah, so I think the trick here is that what I'm trying not to do is tell everyone that there's one solution that is better than the other. What I typically try to articulate when I get questions such as, what's the best practice for microsegmentation? In the past, organizations have typically struggled to implement microsegmentation effectively. So there are various levels of microsegmentation that an enterprise can arguably achieve. And with our own research at Forrester, we call out those levels, but specifically host level or even microservice level, we view that as it being more complex and difficult to implement. But organizations that actually pursued the microsegmentation initiatives as the first initiative for their Zero Trust journey, they found it to be more complex, right? So those same organizations either abandoned the initiative or delayed the initiative to focus on other tasks and other activities. But now organizations are beginning to revisit that conversation around microsegmentation initiatives because they now have a better understanding, right?
Yep.
They learn from their mistakes. But now they have to have an understanding about the approach. So ultimately, what organizations should really be doing when they begin that Zero Trust or microsegmentation journey is identify where those critical assets are in their environment and then actually assess what are the tools and technology, the controls that have already in place that they can actually leverage to achieve a level of maturity that will be one acceptable based on risk tolerance and even risk appetite. So once they have that, then it becomes more of a matter of what is needed to get to that next level of maturity. And another thing I want to add is that while there will be a need to have guidance for organizations. One of the biggest issues that I get in terms of client engagement is that now we're implementing microsegmentation, but we have firewalls, we have ZTNA, we have microsegmentation specific tools and solutions in our environment. These are all various different enforcement points that have policies. So organizations might not be thinking it now, but it might be worth exploring or having conversations internally about what should our guidance be about how we approach our policy rule sets throughout our architecture so that we have a better understanding of what's the most effective and efficient way of approaching the rule sets across our architecture, from meaning the broader we are, the further out in our environment from the edge perimeter, that's going to be the broader policy. Then the closer we are getting to critical assets in our environment, that's where the more granular policy should exist. But it should not be conflicting with each other.
So, Carlos, anyone that's been paying attention for the last year or so knows that Palo Alto Networks has been a really strong proponent of this idea of security platformization, or, unifying security capabilities into like a single AI-driven platform. What are the key advantages of a unified security approach, and how does it compare to the traditional best-in-class security model?
I think the idea behind the unification of security controls is really just to simplify deployment and management of those security controls. So you're actually starting to break down those silos that might have impeded any kind of collaborative discussions within your organizations with respect to, security best practices. What types of controls are going to be needed, and how do you improve those outcomes or improve those operations? There's also that potential for cost savings that when you start exploring platformization or a unified solution, you start reducing the number of licenses you need to procure, maintain, and manage. But you're also reducing complexity within your infrastructure, within the security stack. So it offers that ability to have a visibility and management of all these various different tools with a more centralized manner. And that can actually lead to being more efficient and having a more holistic security architecture. Security analysts can also aim to benefit from this in an indirect way because it's improving incident response times, because it's reducing that complexity and friction that they might experience when it comes to investigations and analytics.
What challenges do organizations face when they're consolidating multiple security tools? And what do you tell them about overcoming those challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is probably identifying where to consolidate. You find that there are various platforms out there, and they can address or consolidate different areas of your own security stack. And they can, but whether it's focused on endpoint or if it's focused on networks, it's or a combination of the two, right? But it's really up to the organization to really decide where they need to be doing that consolidation and what platform fits their particular needs most appropriately. Your entire security stack will not be from a single platform. I think we want to make sure they understand. It's not like you're going to one single platform to address everything that you need. That might be true for maybe a startup organization or small, medium-sized business that's operating fully in the cloud. But for larger, more established enterprises that have maybe a history or already established legacy architecture, that's not going to be necessarily the case. They're going to be operating in a more heterogeneous type of environment. So you got to be more realistic, right? And a comprehensive zero trust architecture should be more of a mixture of platform and best-of-breed solutions that address the organization's specific needs and requirements. So that was kind of another question I get sometimes too, is like, does it make sense to do platform or should I continue doing best-of-breed? And the answer for me is it needs to be a balance of the two. I think in a perfect world, you're going to find this platform fits this particular area, but there might be gaps. And what is the right best-of-breed solution that might be able to address that gap or address your specific situation or need? Maybe you have analysts, or maybe you have admins in your team that are more familiar with this particular tool because it works best for the outcomes they like to use it for. But does that interoperate with the platform is the other thing you want to figure out too. So don't just fall into the idea that you have to have one platform, is what I'm saying. Just find the platform that consolidates what matters most to you and then offer interoperability with the rest of your zero trust ecosystem.
Carlos, I know you're going to be shocked to hear me ask you a question about AI and automation, but everyone's talking about this right now. I think it's a big deal in security. How are AI and machine learning playing a bigger role in security operations?
And this is a topic that comes up a lot, actually. I think, and just not just in the context of enterprise firewalls, but more just broadly as zero trust, right? And I think that the way we have been discussing this at Forrester is that there are two trains of thought, if you will, with respect to AI. First being that how can we leverage zero trust to secure AI? Meaning, in what manner can we apply the principles of zero trust to ensure that we're protecting those large language models and the AI engines that an organization is utilizing to kind of maintain that integrity confidentiality within those AI applications. But also, and the second one is how can we leverage AI to improve zero trust? Now, the latter of that, number two, is where I would say you are already starting to see vendors help with. In the case of enterprise firewalls, this comes not only in the form of generative AI within the application, like chatbots, but where the admins can ask questions for clarification, kind of help with understanding and troubleshooting tasks. But it's also in the adaptive and machine learning capability that can help simplify policies, reduce shadow rules, response anomalies, and really adjust policies based on the threat intel with minimal human interaction, aside from perhaps accepting those changes or adjusting those changes prior to committing them. So, and then from an incident response perspective, I think through AI, enterprise firewalls with IDS, IPS, and some of the other advanced threat prevention functions can actually resolve incidents based on the severity and level of threat, allowing analysts to really focus more on more complex and time-invested investigation. So I think there was with AI machine learning within the IDS and IPS and the other advanced threat prevention tools, they can address the more the standard, well-known threats that are out there without having to really bother the security analyst. And the security analyst is freed up to kind of focus on the more complex types of investigative issues.
So you've talked about some of the advantages of AI broadly, and I think within the firewall space. What are some of the things that organizations need to be cautious about when we're relying on those AI-driven solutions?
The thing is, with AI and machine learning, it's been around for quite some time now, right? It's not, they're not new per se. They're not emerging during this era. I think the applications towards improving incident response and simplifying admin activities are fairly new, right? The idea that a fully autonomous solution would be a viable tool for a lot of organizations to leverage, I would still say that's aspirational today, right? Because I think there is still a level of trust, right, and confidence that needs to be gained before an autonomous solution can actually be deployed so freely in a production environment. So instead, I would say it's best to become more familiar with how to use it currently, which is one a supportive supplemental capability. Being able to understand how it works and begin to enable it on those standard basic processes. So once you're comfortable and happy, you can expand upon that application to other processes. And we as a society tend to kind of jump headfirst into new amazing things. We're not really truly
Sure.
building any kind of respect for that. You know, I like to related to driving, right? I love cars. I'm a huge car guy. And so the way I learned was I learned in a manual transmission car, right? You want a car, you want the car, it's got the convenience to get you to point A to point B. It's got all the latest bells and whistles on it. And usually everyone will have to go with that automatic transmission, but I learned manual because what that does, it builds respect for the car. You have to learn the way it functions. You have to listen to it and respect, you want to make sure it doesn't crash and burn, right? When you're behind the wheel. And in that same vein, I would say people need to kind of build a little bit more respect, get familiar, train yourself on it with AI before you jump in headfirst with it.
So if I understand that right, in the AI world, to your car analogy, we don't want to burn the clutches up as we're
Yeah.
learning how to use this. All right. Yeah, I just got an EV that has one pedal driving, which is a whole other mind shift. And there is no clutch, and there's like the brakes there in case things happen. But kind of a wild shift to come back and respect
Yeah.
a totally different model of trying to drive around. I love it. I've got nothing but good things to say about the Mach E. It's a ton of fun to drive. So we've talked about how AI can help, where to be cautious. Now I want to pivot around and think about this from, the attacker side. Carlos, as an analyst at Forrester, you're constantly evaluating emerging trends in cybersecurity. What do you think is the most overlooked cybersecurity trend that organizations should be paying more attention to now?
From my perspective, at least, there's a lot of conversations that involve satellite security, or really kind of just the negligence of network security. Maybe negligence is not the right word. I would say the overlooking of network security. So part of what I'm actually trying to do actively right now is I'm trying to come up with a new definition of modern network security. The reason behind that is because I think for a while, maybe 5, 10 years ago, we had this set definition of what network security means, right? Some might argue this is up to the cybersecurity, and it was mostly on-prem. When you hear network security, you think hardware, physical hardware. But I feel like today the future has changed that. We've moved into the cloud. A lot of our resources are no longer confined within the safety net of our organization's architecture, right? It exists in multiple clouds, it exists in virtual environments. So there's a definition of network security need to change to accommodate to that. And my mindset is yes, because anywhere that packets flow, that packets traverse is part of network security. And that would include cloud. Even though there is a different context within cloud security, you have cloud security and fundamentals about your resources there, but the path itself from a user existing remotely at home or in an office and a resource exists in the cloud, they're traversing various different paths to get to that resource. That's network security. So I think what I'm trying to do now, I feel that maybe vendors maybe could do a better job at is communicating what does network security mean today.
It makes me think that if we were to design security and naming structures of who's going to do what today, like if we started today, we'd have a very different set of language that we'd use rather than the language that we have. And it makes sense why we have it. But as you're talking about that, the idea of where the data is at and where it's flowing to, on some level, it doesn't really matter if it's quote unquote cloud or network. The end goal is still, how do you make sure that that data is available? How do you make sure that it's protected, right? Like the CIA triad comes back to mind here, rather than our engineering constructs.
It's also taking into consideration the various different mediums, right? Because when you think network security, you immediately are drawn to wired and wireless, right? But it also includes 5G, and it also includes satellite security. I think we're starting to see satellite securing space systems and securing satellite communications becoming more and more common topics in discussions because we've seen it. With satellite security and securing space systems, you're seeing the need for that because of recent incidents, right? You saw, the Ukraine incidents. A lot of government powers are looking to leverage, space systems as a new warfare and disrupt a nation's ability to defend against themselves and to be self-sustained. We're relying on a lot of satellite communications for services, for public services, internet being one of those. So once you remove that, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle. We rely for communications and for insights and visibility. How are we securing these satellite communications? And that's going to be another, I would say, rising topic when it comes to discussion in cybersecurity.
Carlos, are there any recent security developments that have really personally surprised you?
Recent security developments that have surprised me. I mean, we're seeing it kind of unfold now in terms of executive orders, governments buying in and making more, or at least being more influential in how organizations and how the industry should approach cybersecurity and making our areas, our networks more defensible. That is, to me, it's not so much surprising as it is, I would say, it's a moment of pride, I guess, because I do come from the government side and I know what the DoD has done in the past. And, they're always kind of ahead of the game, ahead of the curve when it comes to those types of implementations. But now it's kind of the influence. I think we're returning to this new norm, or the norm of, we look to the government to set precedents on what we should do for cybersecurity. And seeing that unfold today, or at least in this day and age, it's a bit of rewarding.
Carlos, organizations are rapidly adopting Zero Trust Network Access, so ZTNA, and Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, to secure remote and hybrid workers. How do those technologies complement enterprise firewalls, and where do you see ZTNA and SASE evolving in the next 5 years?
So I think these are technologies and frameworks that really complement enterprise firewalls, because they become an extension of the scope in which an enterprise firewall can utilize beyond bare metal solutions, right? Additionally, you can still manage policies regardless if it is part of a SASE framework or, via firewall as a service, or a virtualized or cloud instance, or even an on-prem hardware deployment. And because ZTNA is now being built into enterprise firewall solutions as an add-on capability, organizations that kind of want to get into the adoption of ZTNA can already start beginning that journey by leveraging enterprise firewalls as an enforcement point that can be within the ZTNA architecture. And it allows for ZTNA to be adopted both in a remote and localized use cases. And over the next 5 years, it's hard to say where the market's going to be going. I feel like there is already so many new entrants into the space for ZTE SASE that it's going to be so saturated. But I think it might evolve eventually where you're going to start seeing a little bit of cannibalism, if that makes sense, where there's mergers and acquisitions occurring. I think the differentiation that's going to have to be viewed is, how effective are they in incorporating modern technologies and standards that could allow an organization to be more aligned with the trends and threats of today?
So looking ahead, cybersecurity is definitely going to continue to rapidly evolve. What are your security predictions in the next 5 years?
I think we're already kind of seeing them unfold right now, right? I think the conversation around network security for on-prem, what I see in terms of prediction is that on-prem will continue to be a growing need. There was for a while, there's been a push for cloud migration, and that was the driving factor for cloud adoption. But the reality is that most organizations are going to be operating in a hybrid architecture and a hybrid environment. So if anything, I would start seeing a need to have these solutions, these modern solutions, be applicable to on-prem, right? And then you're kind of already seeing that unfold with some of the vendors who are adopting a universal version of the tool capability that was primarily cloud to kind of address those on-prem use cases. The other thing is that I foresee a strong growth in conversations around OT. I think that for most organizations, IT I think there's a comfort level that we've achieved in IT in terms of conversations for best practices and what we should be doing and implementing, how we can leverage Zero Trust and the tools and technologies around it. But OT is an unaddressed issue, I would say. There's conversations about how can we apply Zero Trust? Can we apply Zero Trust in OT? What does Zero Trust in OT look like? What are the best practices? Because there's a lot of different challenges and unique situations that need to be addressed in OT. So I would just see a growth in tools and technologies that are addressing OT. I do see that AI is going to continue to ramp up its influence in the industry, right? You're kind of already seeing that where a lot of organizations are trying to, or at least vendors are trying to come up with solutions that are going to be products they can leverage to secure large language models. So these are tools and technologies that are specific towards protecting those assets. I think you've seen that with a couple of vendors. They call it AI firewall, but it's nebulous at best. But I think you're going to start seeing that kind of ramp up a bit more.
Carlos, thanks for such an awesome conversation today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights, your predictions, and your deep thoughts on this important topic of network security.
It was great. I enjoyed the conversation. I think this is something that's of importance, at least for me, for sure. Network security, I think, is a big, important conversation for me. I think the thing is, network security still matters. There's a lot of maybe doubt that it doesn't matter anymore with the push to cloud, things of that nature, but the network security continues to be of importance and relevance.
Absolutely. I think Palo Alto Networks might agree. That's it for today. A huge thank you to Carlos Riviere for joining us and sharing his insights on security platformization, the evolution of enterprise firewalls, and the future of Zero Trust. Cybersecurity is constantly shifting, but one thing is clear. Organizations that take a strategic approach to unifying their security stack will be better equipped to handle today's threats and whatever comes next, whether it's leveraging AI for security operations, rethinking microsegmentation, or ensuring your firewall strategies align with Zero Trust. Now is the time to assess where you stand and where you need to go. If you found today's conversation valuable, you might also enjoy Unlocking Cybersecurity ROI with Platformization. In that episode, we explored how security platformization is transforming enterprise security, reducing mean time to detect incidents by 72 days and driving a 4x ROI on cybersecurity investments. You can find that episode wherever you listen to podcasts. As always, please subscribe wherever you listen and leave us your review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews and feedback really do help us understand what you want to hear about. I want to thank our executive producer, Michael Heller, our content and production teams, which include Kenny Miller, Joe Pinnacourt, and Virginia Tran. Elliot Peltzman edits the show and mixes the audio. We'll be back next week. Until then, stay secure, stay vigilant. Goodbye for now.